Hi, my name is Zorya. They told people I was away, overseas, disconnected, but I was closer than they ever knew. Close enough to hear them rewrite my name off the will, reframe my medals into living room decor, and pretend the girl in uniform wasn't ever theirs. My stepmother locked me in a Pentagon basement during a security briefing, and when two Blackhawks landed to extract me, they didn't ask who I was. They saluted and called me General. But how long had my own family known who I was, and still tried to erase it? What kind of woman uses her stepdaughter's voice to rewrite legacy and gets caught doing it? And what happens when silence finally stops cooperating? You think you've seen betrayal? Wait until you hear what my mother did in court. The first thing I noticed when I pulled up wasn't the new paint job on Verina's house, or the cars lining the driveway like they belonged there. It was the porch light, still flickering like it had for years. Funny how a flickering bulb could remind you exactly where you stood. I stood there for a full minute before I knocked. Not because I was nervous, just measuring the weight of showing up again. No one opened the door. Eventually, I let myself in. The hallway still smelled of lemon-scented cleaner and whatever perfume Verina wore that lingered even after she left a room. There were voices down the hall, laughing, clinking glasses, Calixte's signature overlaugh, probably retelling one of her podcast stories. My name wasn't on the chalkboard welcome back sign they'd doodled in pastel. Everyone else had a name. I was just the echo that got in through a side door. Verina appeared at the kitchen arch like a hostess who hadn't expected an extra guest. "Oh, sweetheart," she cooed, arms spread just a little too late. "We weren't sure you'd make it. You look so serious. But I guess that's just you." Her hug was light. She kissed the air beside my cheek. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. They'd set the table in the sunroom, long and gleaming. Wine glasses already full. My seat? Closest to the powder room, tucked behind a potted plant. My place card just said Zed. Everyone else had their full names written in gold script. It was the only seat left. "You understand, right?" Verina said, as if logistics justified symbolism. I nodded and sat. But it wasn't about the seat. It was the message. Loud, underhanded, and intentional. Calixte was holding court as usual, talking about her new episode, Why Boundaries Are Self-Love. I heard murmurs of agreement, the occasional, "That's so true," from the others. She hadn't seen real boundaries, not the kind that came in the form of military perimeter checks and encrypted communications. But sure, she was the voice of emotional wisdom. I kept my hands folded. I didn't reach for the wine. My phone buzzed in my coat, classified alert pattern, but I didn't check it, not yet. When I stood to stretch, my eyes landed on the family photo wall. I knew the picture before I even got close. It was from my high school graduation. I remember it because Dad had flown back just for the ceremony, fresh from deployment, still smelling like dust and jet fuel. We'd stood side by side on the far right, his hand gripping my shoulder like a promise. In the version on this wall, I was gone. The frame was elegant, the photo cropped perfectly. It wasn't sloppy. It wasn't accidental. I'd been removed as neatly as someone erasing a number on a chalkboard. Dad was still there, smiling. But the girl he was proud of vanished. You don't have to scream to erase someone. You just stop showing them. I returned to my seat. The conversations floated around me like mist. I wasn't part of them. I was the placeholder that made the group seem inclusive. I tried asking Verina for the Wi-Fi password so I could check in with base. She laughed, the kind that stung without needing volume. "Let's try to stay off work mode today, General. We're all just family here." One cousin leaned into another and whispered, loud enough for me to hear, "She always thinks she's still in uniform." I smiled, just slightly. They didn't know what kind of silence I'd trained in. From across the room, a woman I hadn't seen since we were kids looked at me, recognition sparking for half a second before she looked away. That was the thing about returning to places that pretended they'd moved on. You saw who had practiced forgetting you. My phone buzzed again. Still, I didn't check it. I just let the hum settle into my bones. When a room full of people pretends you're invisible, you don't raise your voice. You learn to observe. You collect every flinch, every sentence that stops when you enter. That's the kind of information that doesn't expire. Eventually, I excused myself, claiming I had a work call. The hallway was cooler, quiet. I walked past the guest rooms until I found it, Dad's old study. It had been redone, of course. The desk was replaced with a coffee bar. The bookshelves were now filled with curated paperbacks that looked like they'd never been opened. But one shelf still held a few things untouched. A frame stood slightly off-center. I picked it up. The photo was from that same graduation, but this one hadn't been cropped. There I was, standing proud next to Dad, shoulders square, eyes forward. I turned it over. On the back, in pencil, were the words, "The only one who stood straight that day." I slid the photo into my coat pocket, not to steal, just to remember who I used to be. I slid the photo into my coat pocket and let my fingers rest there for a breath too long. My thumb traced the edge of the frame, now hidden beneath fabric, as if keeping it close would keep something of him alive in the room. The hallway was still quiet, the only sound a faint echo of silverware clinking against porcelain down the corridor. I stepped back into the living room, unnoticed. A woman in a sequined shawl stood to propose a toast, raising her glass with the kind of hollow cheer that's perfected in families like ours. I lingered near the entry, watching. My glass stayed on the side table, untouched. I wasn't thirsty, not for what they were drinking. Verina's voice cut through the clamor. "Oh, remember when Calixte won the Young Voice Award? She stole the whole stage, didn't she?" That wasn't how I remembered it. The memory pulled itself out of hiding, sharp and clear. I was 11, invited to speak at school. I'd practiced for days, wanting Dad to hear it, even if he was overseas. My name had been called, my heart pounding. I stepped up, hands gripping the mic, starting with, "I want to thank my dad and—" Then Verina appeared out of nowhere, walking straight up to the podium like she owned the air between me and the crowd. "Let's not drag others into this," she said, snatching the mic like I was holding a weapon instead of a thank you. The audience chuckled awkwardly. I stood there, frozen, blinking into silence. I hadn't forgotten that moment. I just buried it under layers of protocol and discipline. Now, Calixte laughed at the memory, like it was harmless nostalgia. That was the first time I realized speaking out had a cost, I thought. I didn't laugh. I sat near the patio door instead, letting the afternoon light spill across my lap. My coat was folded over the armrest, my badge catching a streak of sun. The metal winked at me, quiet acknowledgement that I'd become something despite them, not because of them. A small figure approached, my cousin's daughter, maybe 9 or 10. Her shoes barely made a sound against the tile. "Are you really a general?" she whispered. I nodded, not moving. "Then why do they treat you like you're invisible?" I looked at her. That innocent confusion cut deeper than most of the rehearsed jabs I'd been dodging all afternoon. "Sometimes," I said softly, "even generals don't outrank family stories." She nodded slowly and walked away without another word. Someone passed around a tray of envelopes labeled "Birthday Wishes for Mom." The stack was pretty, ribboned and pastel. I recognized one, pale peach with the words, "From all of us," in that elegant, empty cursive. I opened it. Inside, a message read, "Wishing you another beautiful year." No signature, no name. Just a sentiment that could have been printed on a drugstore card and dropped in a basket by a stranger. Last year, I'd mailed a handwritten note from my base. 3 paragraphs, inked slowly, over days between missions. Verina never mentioned receiving it. I guess now I knew why. Someone across the room asked about Calixte's book tour. "The whole family must be proud," they said. Verina beamed. "Of course! Every one of my daughters shines in her own way." Everyone. Eyes shifted to me. No correction. No. Zorya's doing important work too. Just the warm gloss of a practiced lie, and everyone chose not to challenge it. I smiled tightly. And when a lie is told often enough, I thought, silence becomes complicity. My glass was still full. I stood, not bothering to excuse myself this time. I retrieved my bag from the coat closet, slid my arms into my jacket. The photo in my pocket pressed gently against my side, a reminder of steadier hands than hers. As I reached the door, Verena appeared. Leaving already? You just got here. I paused, meeting her eyes. I was never really here. I opened the front door, but instead of stepping out, I turned toward the guest room my father once used. The door clicked behind me, soft and final. Inside the guest room, the air was still, like time had paused just for this space. The faint scent of cedar lingered in the quilt that hadn't been replaced, maybe because no one cared enough to update what wasn't seen. I didn't turn on the light. There was something about shadows that felt safer than clarity. I dropped my bag gently on the bed and unzipped the side pouch. My old phone was still there, the one I kept for military protocol backups, not connected to any family threads or shared cloud drives. It powered on slower than I remembered. A little whir, a flicker. The screen glowed dimly, and with it, the weight of things I hadn't said. In the Notes app, over 40 drafts sat like bones in a drawer. I'm trying, Mom. Can we talk? Did I ever matter? Each one a moment of weakness, of attempted connection, never sent. Some were only a few words. Others, full paragraphs I never had the courage, or maybe the foolishness, to deliver. I scrolled through them, my thumb hovering over send out of habit, not intent. You don't send words to people who already decided what your silence means. You only send things when you believe someone's still listening. And I wasn't sure anyone in this house ever had. I let the screen go dark. It didn't deserve to shine in here. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I let myself lean back, eyes catching the light patterns on the ceiling. The sound of faint laughter filtered through the vent above the door, Calixte's sharp laugh, followed by murmurs and clinking glasses. But my mind was already slipping backward. I was 9, a muggy summer evening. Dad had just left again, somewhere foreign, hot, and labeled with numbers only clearance-level folks were allowed to memorize. Verena was in a mood because I'd knocked over her planner. Juice, I think. Cherry red, across her calendar. She didn't scream. She didn't hit. She just folded my blanket and laid it neatly on the back porch. I thought it was a surprise, a game. But when I stepped outside, the door closed behind me. Click. I sat on that porch until stars came out, unsure if I was supposed to come back in or wait for an invitation. I fell asleep curled into the blanket, listening to crickets and hoping the door might creak open again. It didn't. The next morning, I was let in without a word. Eggs were already on the plate. Nothing was said about the night before, just silence. And that became the pattern. In the closet now, I found a plastic box labeled junk in faint Sharpie. Inside, old drawings with stick figures. One clearly me with a ponytail, one tall man in uniform, a crumpled party hat, a photo booth strip from some county fair Dad took me to. Him making a silly face, me laughing in the third frame, mouth wide open like I didn't know silence yet. I wiped the dust from the photo strip and tucked it beside the graduation picture still nestled in my coat pocket. These pieces of me didn't belong in this room anymore. From the hallway, Calixte's voice spiked again, dramatic and performative. Family resilience, she said, probably quoting herself. Another round of polite laughs followed. They echoed through the vent like static from a distant channel I no longer tuned into. I zipped my duffel and looked in the mirror. I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the way they wanted me to be. I wasn't about to slam doors or shatter frames. I didn't need to break things to leave. I just had to stop pretending I was ever invited to stay. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A secure thread. Priority. Confirmed chain of custody for intel log. Location. Local site. I stared at the message. Not surprised, not rattled, just ready. I typed one word, confirmed, Then I picked up my bag, slung it over my shoulder, and walked out without looking back. I passed the living room unnoticed. No one asked where I was going. Through the kitchen, I reached the back door, opened it slowly, and stepped into the daylight. I didn't take a plate. I didn't say goodbye. The silence I left behind was louder than any toast. I walked past the hedges and down the sidewalk, the late afternoon light stretching shadows across the pavement. The air felt heavier than it should have, too warm for the breeze that skimmed my shoulders. I didn't know where I was going exactly, just that I needed somewhere not filled with wine glasses, curated smiles, or stories that always left my name out. I ended up at the town library, the kind with creaky floors and staff that didn't ask questions. They'd added a coffee kiosk in the front recently and a row of new computer terminals in the back. I chose one facing the window, slipped into the chair, and pulled up my old military email. Just routine, I told myself. Just habit. But I was chasing something. I just didn't know what yet. In the archives, I found an email labeled Family Reunion RSVP, Response Requested. Sent 6 months ago. I clicked it open. The date listed? 3 days later than the actual event. The one I had just walked out of. I double-checked the server history. The message had been opened, from Verina's address, marked red, no further replies sent to me, no reminders. Just a ghost invitation to a party I was never meant to attend. That's the kind of cruelty people don't talk about, the kind that edits you out so gently, you almost don't notice you're gone, until you see everyone else already there. My phone buzzed again. Are you okay? Verina's message glared from the screen. You seem distant today. I let it sit. 10 minutes later, Calixte's name appeared. I swiped up. She sounded like she was on speaker. Mom's really upset. She says you're always pulling away. Everyone noticed it today. I let her speak. I let the silence grow until it pinched. Then I said, It's hard to attend things you're never really invited to. She stuttered for a second. What's that supposed to mean? But I had already hung up. I closed the browser, pushed the keyboard away, and leaned back. The fluorescent lights above buzzed low. Across the desk, a laminated sign reminded patrons to limit screen time to 30 minutes. I'd only needed 10 to see the pattern wasn't accidental. I remembered my father's memorial. The pastor, reading from a sheet, had mispronounced my name, twice. No one corrected him. The printed program had listed me as a guest under military friends. Not daughter, not even family. I hadn't said anything at the time. Maybe I'd convinced myself it was a typo. But today, I knew better. At the front desk, I signed out the computer and turned to leave. The librarian looked up from her stamp pad. You're Zorya Stanton, aren't you? I nodded, unsure what was coming next. My nephew served too, she said. He used to mention your name. Said you were sharp, no nonsense. I blinked, caught off guard. Thank you, I said. For saying that. She smiled. You're welcome. It was the first time all day someone had spoken to me like I wasn't a rumor in my own family. I stepped outside, the sun now dipping low. I pulled my coat tighter and whispered aloud, I won't beg to sit at a table that resents my presence. By the time I made it back to the rental, evening had fully settled. I poured a glass of water, sat at the table, and opened my email again. This time, not to check the past, but to record it. That night, while I was folding laundry, my phone buzzed again. A tagged photo had popped up on social media. Verina, Calixte. A dozen others gathered under a banner that read, Family is everything. A second dinner, private, close family only. The caption read, So glad everyone could make it. There was no mention of me. Of course. I didn't comment. I didn't even blink. I just took a screenshot, timestamped it, and filed it away into a folder I'd labeled earlier that week. Discrete evidence. The next morning, I showed up at the house around 9. No one had told me to come, no message, no invite. But that didn't matter. I had enough evidence to stop asking for permission. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the air smelled like coffee and leftover salmon. The dining table still held the remnants of their second dinner. Half-empty wine glasses, napkins with lipstick prints, a fork stuck into a cold casserole. No one even bothered to clear it. That's how permanent exclusion works. It becomes so casual, no one notices the mess anymore. Verena appeared in the kitchen, robe tied too tight like she was cinching in something heavier than fabric. "You're early," she said, not surprised, not welcoming. "Didn't know there was a schedule," I replied. She smiled faintly and gestured toward the hallway. "There's something you need to hear, officially." The study looked exactly like it had when Dad used it. Except now, the shelves were lined with curated books neither of them had read. She handed me a manila folder, her nails tapping on the cover before releasing it. "It's from the estate lawyer. You should read it." I opened the file. A notarized amendment to my father's will. Due to prolonged absence and disconnection, I, Frederick Hargrove, release Zorya Stanton from all primary beneficiary status. My father's signature was real. I knew that loop in the F anywhere. But that line, that statement, he never would have written that. Not in the way it was worded. Not with that language. I looked up. "You were never around, sweetheart," Verena said, sipping her coffee. "What did you expect?" "What I expected," I said evenly, "was that the same man who gave me that flag when I graduated OCS wouldn't be rewritten by your pen and a real estate clause." Her voice flattened. "Don't accuse me. Everything was done properly." I didn't argue. I took out my phone, opened my secure vault, and snapped a picture of the document. Then I walked out into the hallway, past the bookshelf, toward the family photo wall. There it was, the one photo they hadn't altered yet. Me and Dad, standing together in dress blues, his hand on my shoulder at graduation. The only image in the entire house that hadn't tried to erase me. I reached up and unlatched the frame. Behind me, Verena's footsteps approached fast. "That stays," she said sharply. "It's part of the family memory wall." I turned, still holding the frame. "Then why do I feel like a ghost in it?" Her mouth tightened, but she didn't answer. "This wall doesn't tell the truth. Neither does that will." "Maybe truth isn't about facts," she said, that syrupy venom slipping back in. "It's about who writes the version people believe." I held the photo for a second longer, then gently returned it to the hook. Not because she was right, but because I knew what was real, and I didn't need to steal something to prove it. I turned back toward the wall, not to Verena, but to the image. "I see you, Dad, even if no one else does." And with that, I grabbed my bag and walked to the front door. I didn't slam it, didn't give her the satisfaction. Halfway down the front steps, my phone buzzed again. "Your identity credentials were accessed from a civilian terminal. Do you confirm this request?" I stopped mid-step. Now I knew where the war started. I didn't head straight home. My car seemed to know the way to the secure co-working space near the metro without being told. I parked in the side lot, badge in hand, and walked through the secondary entrance. A few early tech contractors glanced up from their monitors but said nothing. This wasn't a place where people made small talk. In the private room I'd reserved months ago for reasons I couldn't quite explain at the time, I logged into the air-gapped machine. No Wi-Fi, no family sharing, just me and the server. I opened the trace log from command and began digging. The breach happened 2 weeks ago, middle of the night, IP origin linked to Verena's block. That didn't surprise me. What did was the file attached to the access. Form 33C Authorization, Z Stanton. It looked official. The typeface, the header, even the formatting mirrored everything I'd seen in actual use. I scanned the embedded metadata. There it was, my voice. At the bottom of the form was a signature block with a time-coded voice authorization clip. I clicked play. "Zorya Stanton, confirm authorization." But I never said those words. Not like that. I recognized the cadence, but the tone didn't match. It was spliced. I could hear it, the tiny, unnatural dips between syllables, like someone had clipped pieces of old voicemails and stitched them together with audio software. This wasn't just fraud, it was a simulation of consent, a ghost of my voice, saying things I never agreed to. I stared at the waveform on screen, pulse steady. I didn't panic. I forwarded the file to my tech contact at base with one word: verify. Then I encrypted the entire folder, renamed it VH Custody Breach, and stored it in my secure drive. Whatever this was, it wasn't just personal anymore. If they want to weaponize my voice, I whispered to myself, they should have remembered I trained to disarm bombs with a whisper. Later that night, I returned to the house. I'd expected it to be quiet, but the driveway was full again. The hum of conversation floated through the kitchen window. Another event. Another performance. I walked through the side entrance and froze in the parlor. There, propped neatly on a gold-accented throw pillow on the center love seat, was my silver star. A woman in pearls leaned over and admired it. "It's so inspiring that your daughter served so valiantly." Verena beamed, glass of Chardonnay in hand. "Oh, she's always been part of our story." I stepped forward, no hesitation, no drama. I lifted the pillow, removed the metal, and let the silence ripple across the room. The guest looked at me, unsure whether she was watching theater or truth. "This medal wasn't earned for your narrative," I said, my voice steady. "It was earned for silence under gunfire, something this room wouldn't understand." Verena didn't flinch. She never did when it mattered. "You always make a scene, Zorya." "And you always make yourself the center of someone else's pain," I replied. The metal felt heavier in my palm than it ever had pinned to my uniform. I left the room without waiting for a reaction. On the porch, just as the door clicked behind me, my phone buzzed again. A message from my contact at base. "Confirmed. The file is fabricated. Your voice was built using AI from call logs stored on a shared family drive." So that's how she'd done it. Quietly, casually, like all her other cuts. I turned off the screen, tucked the phone in my coat, and whispered to no one. Next step: control the narrative. I didn't sleep that night. I started sorting files by threat level, and every one of them had Verena's fingerprints. The sunrise barely cut through the overcast sky as I pulled into the lot outside the Pentagon's East Wing. I hadn't slept. My hands were steady anyway. Maybe steadier, because I had no energy left to pretend anything else. I parked, showed my badge, and walked through the checkpoint with the kind of mechanical confidence I'd earned over years, not hours. The guard waved me through with a nod. "You're down in sub B2 today, General." That didn't sound right. "New directive came in late," he added, already looking past me. "Intel retrieval protocol." I didn't argue. I'd learned to let certain things play out. The elevator ride down was slow, humming, familiar in its impersonality. At sub B2, the door opened. The air was colder there, even for a concrete box. I scanned my badge. The light blinked green. The door slid open, heavy and thick. I stepped inside, and then I heard the lock engage behind me. I turned, tested the handle. Dead. The lights dimmed. No signal, no service, no cameras, no accident. I stood in the middle of the room for a moment, letting the silence press against my ribs. My training kicked in, not in panic, but in calculation. 10 minutes passed. I didn't knock, didn't shout. At minute 11, I reached down and triggered the emergency beacon embedded in the underside of my watch. "If someone tries to make you disappear," I muttered, "make sure someone else notices the silence." I leaned against the wall, inhaled slow, deep, counted to 5, then again. I thought about Kandahar, about the door jam we had to breach with less than 30 seconds to spare, about how one of my team members cracked a joke as we ran, because sometimes humor is the only weapon left. People think chaos is the threat. It's not. It's the illusion of order while someone slowly rewrites the floor plan beneath your feet. Eventually, the door hissed open again. I didn't flinch when 2 MPs entered, followed by a senior compliance officer. They spoke quickly, formal tones, something about a comms disruption. I said nothing. By noon, I was back upstairs, seated in a debrief room. Clean, cold, neutral. I waited. My phone buzzed, and instinctively, I checked the secure feed. I didn't expect it, but there it was. A banner image. My own face in uniform, lifted from an official portrait. Above it, the logo of Verina's nonprofit. Under it, a quote, "Strength is inherited. I thank my mother for mine." And the caption, "The brave daughter of our founder, Verena Hargrove, showing what legacy means." They'd used my image. Again. This time publicly. As if nothing had happened. As if her story was mine to obey. I stared at the screen, not blinking. A few minutes later, I ran a quick metadata check. The upload traced back to her home IP. Of course. I took a screenshot, filed it. Then I opened a new thread and typed 4 words to my contact. "Activate quiet protocol." She crossed the line. I wasn't going to fight her in public. That would make her a victim. I would fight her where the records lived. In silence. With evidence. With every move calculated 3 steps ahead. I pulled the full archive, flagged the forged voice file, and filed the social media post as Exhibit F. I tagged it under Narrative Misappropriation. If you want a war, I thought, you don't declare it with words, you declare it by surviving. I gathered my things. The debrief was ending. As I stepped out of the room, another message buzzed through. Command unit rerouted. ETA 11 minutes. Coordinates locked. I adjusted my watch, straightened my coat, and started walking. This wasn't escape, it was arrival. On my terms this time. The wind picked up across the tarmac just as I stepped off the loading dock. The air tasted metallic, like it always did before something shifted. 2 stripes of sun broke through the cloud cover, bouncing off the concrete like it was glass. I walked with purpose, not fast, not slow, but with the kind of pace that made people step aside without realizing why. Colonel Ramirez was already there, standing near the helipad, eyes scanning the perimeter like always. His nod was minimal, respectful, nothing more than what protocol required, but enough to say, "I see you." "Ma'am?" he said, no question in his voice, just acknowledgement. Behind him, the first helicopter touched down. The sound roared into the space between us, rotor blades slicing the air with exactitude. A second one followed seconds later. Identical formation. Blackhawks. No markings. No delay. 2 squads disembarked, one internal affairs, the other a composite of legal oversight and digital compliance. Each carried sealed cases. Each moved with synchronized certainty. Ramirez turned slightly. "Stanton protocol initiated. We're on mission continuity and containment." My name was a directive now. Civilians nearby stopped mid-step. A press associate from Verena's foundation stood dumbfounded, tablet in hand. He tried to approach, but was intercepted and calmly escorted off the perimeter. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I stepped toward the central briefing tent that had been erected for the operation. One of the officers, a specialist in cybersecurity, looked up as I entered. "Is General Stanton safe?" he asked aloud. Verena, who stood stiff near the tent's edge, heard it. Her shoulders tensed, but she didn't move. Ramirez knelt briefly, just enough to show he knew exactly who held the command in that space. "Ma'am, we're here under your command." It wasn't for show. It wasn't theater. It was the truth finally being spoken, in a language this family hadn't dared acknowledge. I gave a simple nod. "Secure the archive. Red tag all files under Stanton Protocol A3. Nothing leaves without dual key authorization." "Yes, ma'am." I turned then, not to the officers, not to the chaos forming quietly behind the controlled motions, but to Verena. She stared back like someone trying to blink away their own erasure. "You created a narrative," I said. "Now I'll correct the record." There was no snark in her expression, just something resembling disbelief. maybe regret, maybe the realization that manipulation doesn't scale forever. An officer approached with a sealed container. Inside, folded neatly, was the flag that once lay above my father's memorial display, turned decor by Verina's vanity. He held it out to me. I didn't flinch. "That belongs with service," I said quietly, "not with decor." She tried to step forward, but I raised my hand, palm steady, no emotion. Not rejection, just finality. The squad began logging devices from her team's base of operations: phones, tablets, backup drives, all placed into coded bags with procedural numbers. "This will go on record," Ramirez said to me, his voice low, "but we'll keep it internal, for now." I nodded. Let her feel safe. It's when people relax that they reveal everything. She watched me with something that looked like betrayal, but I didn't give her a script to read from this time. That night, I returned to my private terminal, opened a secure channel, typed 4 words. Now let the rot surface. By dawn, my phone was a war zone. Notifications stacked one over another, blinking like flares on a field I didn't ask to command. I scanned the headlines, some speculative, others dead accurate. "Who is General Stanton?" one asked. Another read, "Pentagon standoff? Video raises questions." I clicked the link. A shaky clip, clearly recorded from behind a barricade. The moment the Black Hawks touched down. The line Ramirez had said aloud, "We're here under your command." Then the silence afterward, thick with the weight of power shifting hands. I hadn't authorized that footage, but I didn't need to. Someone on the inside had made sure it reached the outside. First to military forums, then to Reddit, then everywhere. The comments spiraled fast. "She was locked in? Who signed off on that? Why isn't this being covered by mainstream media? She didn't flinch. That's command presence." Verina scrambled to control it. On her Foundation's page, she posted, "There's been confusion regarding a recent video. It's a family misunderstanding, unfortunately recorded and misconstrued." That made it worse. People dug deeper. Old blog interviews resurfaced. Times she spoke vaguely about her daughter's service, never naming me, but always implying I was a loyal extension of her legacy. Then came the sponsors. 2 dropped out within hours. "We're reevaluating partnerships," they wrote in curated corporate speak. Others followed, quietly, cautiously, but unmistakably. And just when I thought the wave had peaked, an anonymous burner email landed in my secure inbox. No message, just a link. I opened it. It was a screen recording of a Zoom call, dated a year ago. Verina, framed perfectly in front of a bookshelf that had probably been staged, spoke in a calm, deliberate tone. "Once she's overseas again, we'll finalize the paperwork," she said. "If we strip her of the narrative now, no one will notice she ever led it." There was a pause. Then a nod from someone off screen. Calixte. Watching. Silent. Present. They didn't know they were being recorded, but now the world did. The video had already spread through a private veterans network. From there, it was only a matter of time. I watched it twice. No sound came out of me, just the sound of keys as I built the file. Timeline, evidence, IP logs, metadata from the social posts, the fabricated audio file, the photo misuse, the forged signature. I compressed it all into a single document and sent it to the Inspector General with one line in the subject: "Let facts speak." I didn't write a cover note, didn't add commentary. I wasn't here to perform. Later that night, a text came through. "Verina, whatever this is, I didn't deserve to be dragged like this. You've always been crueler than you realize." I stared at the screen, then typed back, "I didn't drag you. I just stopped covering your tracks." The message read "seen" within a minute. I turned off the phone, set it face down. I didn't need it for what came next, because the next morning, my mailbox held a legal envelope. No sender listed. Inside, a formal notification. "Verina Hargrove, under investigation." I stood in the hallway with the envelope still in my hand, its weight disproportionate to its size. I didn't need to open it. I already knew what it said. But I did anyway. Slowly. Quietly. I unfolded the letter, read each line like it might disappear if I blinked too hard. It was official. DOJ letterhead, reference number, timestamp. My complaint had passed preliminary audit. The file was moving forward. The evidence I'd compiled, the voice forgery, the IP logs, the statements, had been validated. They listed Verina's full name, residence, affiliations, the IP address from her street, the flagged call records, the passive-aggressive emails sent to old family contacts suggesting I was emotionally unstable, that I shouldn't be trusted with confidential clearance. They always think whispers leave no trail, I muttered, folding the letter once more. But receipts print louder than whispers. I poured a cup of coffee I didn't drink, then sat at the small kitchen table near the window. My inbox pinged. Not work. This time it was a forwarded blog post. Headline: Daughter of Nonprofit Figure Files Official Complaint. Digital ID Theft? The article was sparse, speculative. No names confirmed, but the comments section had already filled in the blanks. I didn't forward it. I didn't screenshot it. I just saved it in the archive under a new folder. Public Echo. I thought that would be enough fallout for the week, until a package arrived the next morning. No sender name, just a return address from New York. Inside, a hardcover book, deep blue with a gold foil title. Inheritance: Stories My Mother Gave Me, by Calixte Hargrove. No note, just the book. I opened it slowly, flipping to the dedication page. It read, To the women who raised me, and the silence that shaped me. Chapter 1 was about resilience. Chapter 2, about strength passed down through quiet gestures. By Chapter 5, I saw the photo. It was me, in uniform. Captioned, A close friend of mine who inspired my journey. Not my sister, not even Zorya, just a friend. My name was nowhere in the book, not once. I stared at the image. It had been lifted from a military newsletter years ago. She hadn't even taken it herself, just cropped it into her narrative like I was a tool, not a person. I didn't scream, didn't tear the book. I pulled a red pen from the drawer and started annotating. Every factual inaccuracy. Every moment twisted just enough to pass as truth to someone not paying close attention. I marked it page by page. Date discrepancies. Family quotes that had been altered. Whole events that never happened. I closed the cover, placed it in the drawer beside the notarized DOJ letter. Then I said it out loud, to no one but myself. Your version won't last, but mine will outlive yours in silence. I stood, walked over to the bookshelf where I kept the folded flag. I took it down, held it in both hands, and folded it again, tight, precise, respectful. My phone rang. Ramirez. It's moving fast, he said. You might be asked to testify next week. I'm ready. I meant it. I placed the flag back in its place, now flanked by my service medal and my father's old watch. That night, I opened my laptop and began drafting a single-page statement. I typed the first word, paused at the greeting, then deleted it. It didn't need a Dear Mom. The envelope sat on the counter for nearly an hour before I touched it. Cream-colored, sharp-edged, printed with the official seal of the Department of Justice. No need to guess. When I finally opened it, I did so like you'd open a door you already knew was locked behind you. The court hearing was set. Location confirmed. Time stamped. Verina Hargrove. Officially under federal inquiry for digital identity manipulation, ethical violations, and obstruction. I didn't read it twice. I didn't need to. Instead, I printed the single-page statement I'd typed the night before. No header, no greeting, just facts. Calm, precise. I signed it, placed it in a plain envelope, and wrote 4 words across the front in red ink. Private, do not forward. It wasn't meant for them. It was meant for me, for record. Later that afternoon, I opened the old tin box I kept beneath the folded quilt at the end of my bed. Inside was the letter. His letter. My father's handwriting. Still upright, still centered, still him. I hadn't read it since the day he died. I unfolded it with both hands. The paper had softened over the years, but the ink hadn't faded. If anyone tries to reframe who you were, it read, remember, they'll never change who you are. I saw you, always. My eyes didn't sting. My throat didn't close. I just breathed. Then I placed it beside the other protected documents in the fireproof folder. My medals, my evaluations, and now the court notice. Later that night, Verena texted again, this time short. Do you want to talk? Privately. No lawyers. I didn't respond. I just forwarded it to my attorney. A few minutes later, Ramirez texted, that's not a peace offering, that's a probe. The next day, by prior agreement, I returned to the family house to retrieve the last of my things. Verena wasn't home. I'd asked for that. Calixte had left the spare key under the potted fern out front. Of course she had. I didn't linger. Upstairs, the room smelled like lemon cleaner and someone trying too hard. I took the last of my gear, a few books I'd left behind, and one framed drawing I hadn't thought about in years. It was mine, from when I was 6, a child's sketch of me and my dad in matching army green, stick figures, smiling. I slipped the drawing into my duffel, didn't leave a note, just pulled the tiny nail from the wall and left it bare. No drama, no announcement, just an honest subtraction. Back home, I hung the drawing next to my citation of merit. Not because it belonged there, exactly, but because I did. Not because it's art, I said quietly, because it's mine. I placed Verena's memoir back in its box, locked it again. It wasn't a keepsake, it was evidence. Closure doesn't need permission, just truth. Later that evening, another envelope arrived, sealed, marked urgent. I slid it open with the edge of my badge. Inside, a formal court summons. Her name, my name, the judge's name, and a date. I whispered the line I'd carried in my gut since the night she told me I was no one in my own house. You built this house, I said, folding the notice neatly. You should sit in every room it burns. I marked the hearing date on my calendar and smiled without guilt for the first time in years. The courthouse stood quiet that morning. No reporters, no flashing cameras, no crowd clamoring for a scandal. Just a line of low murmurs, the rustle of jackets, the click of a pen against a legal pad. The kind of silence that wasn't heavy. It was ready. I wore civilian clothes, not a uniform, not a statement, just enough to say, I'm not here to prove who I am. I already know. A few veterans nodded as I entered. Not for show, just something in the eyes. A shared understanding you don't have to explain. Inside the courtroom, Verena sat stiffly beside her lawyer. Her suit was a shade too polished. Her hands clutched a leather folio like it might save her. She didn't look at me. I didn't need her to. The judge began the session with minimal ceremony. My name read clearly. Hers too. Then the list of exhibits, filed neatly, without embellishment. Metadata trails, the spliced audio clip, the non-profit post with my photo, the private Zoom recording. I stood, not rushed, not theatrical. My testimony, I said, is not emotional, it's factual. But it matters because this wasn't just an act of misuse. It was an attempted erasure of identity, of history, of federal service. The judge didn't flinch. He nodded. This is not just an act of defamation, he said calmly. It's the attempted erasure of a federal record. The room shifted. Verena's lawyer leaned in, whispering fast. She didn't reply. Her lips were tight. Her shoulders had dropped a fraction of an inch. The verdict came after brief deliberation. Verena Hargrove, public censure, prohibited from operating any nonprofit for 10 years, required to issue a public statement of correction. Her name no longer attached to any military-affiliated platform. No prison, just removal. But sometimes loss isn't about bars. It's about doors that won't open again. As we left the courtroom, I passed a man I didn't recognize. Older, veteran's cap tilted forward. As we crossed paths, he murmured, "We protect our own, even from their own." I met his eyes. That was enough. Later that week, I visited a new veterans center on the east side of town. Just a brick building with weathered steps and a fresh coat of paint inside. Nothing fancy. But on the wall, right near the main desk, was a framed poster. It was me, in uniform. My name beneath it. Full. Unedited. Next to it, a small plaque read, "In honor of those who were silenced, but stood anyway." The Stanton Initiative. I hadn't known they'd named it after me. I hadn't asked. But this time, the image was earned. And it stayed. A boy, maybe 8 years old, pointed up at the poster. "Is that a superhero?" he asked. I crouched beside him. "No," I said. "Just someone who stopped being quiet." He looked back at it like he was learning something new. When I stepped outside, the air was crisp, sky clear. The courthouse bell chimed in the distance, faint, but there. I hadn't done all this to be right. I'd done it so that silence wouldn't win again. And it hadn't. Back home, I poured tea, sat in the armchair near the mantel. The flag remained exactly where I'd left it, the folds still sharp. Nothing had been taken from me, not anymore. I leaned back, let the steam rise. Thought of Dad. Not with sorrow, but steadiness. Sometimes truth doesn't arrive with applause. Sometimes it just stops the wrong story from being told. And that's enough. The screen fades out over a plaque. What you reclaim in silence echoes longer than what was ever stolen.